Hi, everyone. Thanks for hopping in. We're going to start in a few minutes. If you can make sure that you have your Zoom account on mute, just so we don't get any residual background noise, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
I'm going to hit mute also. You guys will have to unmute yourselves when called upon.
I know we have a tight agenda for tonight. Dia, are you okay if I go ahead and get us started?
Yeah, of course, if that's good with everyone else.
Yeah, I think we can just jump right in. So my name is Jenny Hutchinson. I'm the president of the Silicon Valley Democratic Club. As you may have noticed when you signed in tonight, this meeting is being recorded. If you do not want to be on the recording, please turn off your video and mute yourself. Our meeting tonight is going to run a bit longer than usual. It's scheduled to go till 8:30. We are honored to co-host with the Silicon Valley Youth Climate Action and Sunnyvale Democratic Club. We have a fantastic program tonight in honor of Earth Day. And at the end, the Silicon Valley Democratic Club members will be voting on whether to endorse several climate bills that will be presented here tonight. Afterwards, we will also consider an unrelated resolution to censure Larry Stone. So if you are an SVDC member, please stay through the end to vote. And if you have any questions about your membership, please feel free to message me. So our focus tonight is on environmental activism, and the discussion will be led by leaders from the Silicon Valley Youth Climate Action, or SVYCA. It is an all-volunteer youth-led nonprofit, and they've created a 2-hour climate advisory that will reach 10,000 students in Fremont Union High School District this Earth Week. And they're also making it available to other school districts. They've also hosted speaker series, candidate forums, demonstrations, and more. They've mobilized youth and passed aggressive and vital climate policy at the local and state level. So in less than 2 years, they've made a huge impact. So we're honored to have our MCs tonight, who are Dia Kondra and Jared Lebovich. They are high school students and co-leads for the SVYCA Morgan Hill team. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to Dia.
Great, thank you so much, Jenny. Hello, everyone, and welcome to SVYCA's first Earth Day celebration. Oh, by the way, before I get started, can I please request that we have our slides screen shared? Jeff, if you can get have that presented, that'd be appreciated.
That's turned on for our speakers, for everyone, okay. Actually.
Okay, we have a few slides. I can screen share that if that would be easy then. Here, let me get that going. Sorry about that. Here we go. I'll screen share for just for intro then. So hello everyone again. Welcome to SVYCA's first Earth Day celebration. My name is Dia Kondra and I'm a student leader with SVYCA, but tonight I'm also your co-MC. We are so grateful to have our co-sponsors and co-hosts of the Silicon Valley Democratic Club, Sunnyvale Democratic Club, and Silicon Valley Youth Climate Action help us coordinate this event, as well as co-founders Tara Sri Krishnan, Linda Sell, and Toy Poon. In addition to their efforts, we appreciate the many other climate leaders and groups for their mentorship and partnerships that have allowed SVYCA to lead impactful climate action and educational events like this one. We are also extremely grateful for our incredible guest speakers you'll hear from later tonight. We have Silicon Valley Clean Energy CEO, Girish Balachandran, and Environment California State Director, Laura Deehan. As we all know, this past year has been extremely challenging for the world, with climate change being no exception. Locally, California has had yet another round of devastating wildfires last summer and fall, with many of our friends and families facing threat of evacuation. But throughout this time, youth have continued to advocate for progressive environmental action, and SVYCA has led by example with our recent climate advisories developed by us for over 10,000 students in the Fremont Union High School District, and our continuation of advocacy on vital climate policy at the local and state levels alike. And tonight, we will all learn about how we can spring into meaningful action for our climate. Today, going on to springing into action, We're going to start off with a presentation about climate progress on the state and national level by Ms. Deehan, followed by some Q&A by me. And then around 7:30 p.m., you'll hear about the impacts of community choice energy sources from Mr. Balachandran, with the following Q&A hosted by my co-MC, Jared. And after this Q&A, Jared will welcome SVYCA's transit and state advocacy or legislative teams to share their insights, which will close out our event for this evening around 8:25 p.m. or so. But there will also be a voting session for Silicon Valley Democratic Club members only after this event formally closes. So with all of this amazing discussion for the climate plan, let's get this party started. So with that, please help me in welcoming our first speaker, Miss Laura Deehan. I'm so honored to present her this evening. She has worked with Environment California and other organizations in the public interest network like CalPRIG and Impact for 20 years. Most recently, she has led campaigns with Environment California in getting our state to go 100% renewable on solar energy and banning single-use plastic bags. Currently, she directs Environment California's ongoing work in protecting our natural resources, ecosystems, and community health, as well as monumental issues such as climate change. So please help me in welcoming the wonderful Miss Laura Deehan. Please take it away, Laura.
Thank you so much, Dia, and it's so lovely to meet all of you tonight. Thank you for joining this event and for inviting me. Let me see, I'm going to actually, Dia, if you can stop sharing your screen, then I think I can then share my screen. And I just made a little slideshow as well with the things that I said I would talk about. So as Dia mentioned, I'm now the state director at Environment California, and I'm really excited to get to take the lead of this organization. We work for clean air, clean water, open space, and we've been also really focused, as you guys are, on the climate crisis at hand and how we can make sure that California continues to lead the way in tackling the climate crisis and making sure that we create the clean energy future we have to have on planet Earth as soon as possible. And so I wanted to share, first of all, why our state, why California is so important, how we can really help to lead the world to this clean energy future. I also want to just talk about and touch on how the President Biden's leadership is shaping the discourse and creating opportunities for us to lead the way as well. And then I'll talk about a few of the efforts that are taking place in our state, currently being debated in Sacramento, you know, that I think you guys are also looking at and talking about tonight as well. And then I wanted to just finish by talking about why and how you can, you know, help to lead the charge in this effort, which you're already doing, but how you can continue to do that. So that's what I was going to touch on, and then hopefully we'll have time for questions. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is just how California can be a real player, a real leader in the global sphere of deciding whether or how much we tackle the climate crisis. So the first thing is that California just matters because of the sheer scale of our state. We are now the 5th largest economy in the entire world. We, you know, also have like 1 in 8 Americans living in our state. And because of the size of our state, we're able to have a really big impact on the country, on the country's policies, and on the world, on the, you know, economic decisions, you know, that will impact marketplaces, that will determine how we power our world in the future. And so California just really matters. We also matter because we're a cultural center. When you think about the impact of Silicon Valley on the world's culture and how things operate, it's enormous, the impact that this region of the world has on everything else. Also Hollywood, you know, is in California. So we just have a really amplified impact on how decisions are made. And then the other thing is we've been at the cutting edge of solving some of the really big problems of our time, because we have long experienced some of the biggest problems related to climate change. You know, we've seen firsthand the air pollution problems in our state, and that led to some of the kind of cutting edge clean transportation programs like our zero emission vehicle programs that really help to jumpstart the clean car technologies for the world. We've also, we were one of the first states to adopt clean energy policies like our renewable energy standards. And that again has really helped to lead the way on renewable electricity. So, I think it was our Million Solar Roofs initiative was one good example that resulted in now I think we have 1.2 million solar roofs in our state, which is half of the country's solar roofs. And we also have about 50% of all the clean electric vehicles on the road just in our state. And that stuff doesn't happen accidentally. Really, that is the result of decisions that people in our state have made over the last few decades to make sure that we are solving some of these big problems and really leading the way, kind of catalyzing the change that has to happen. So it really has worked. And I guess I'll say that one other reason that I think we're continuing to push the envelope is because we continue to experience firsthand the problems associated with climate change. As Deehan mentioned, this past year, not only did we have a pandemic to deal with, but we are also experiencing climate change at this accelerated pace in our state. The wildfires that swept our state, burning over 4 million acres of land and leading to California having the worst air quality in the entire world for like weeks on end, it felt like. You guys will probably remember that day when you opened the door and the sky was orange. We are experiencing the problem right in our backyard. And that is what it means that the public here agrees that we need to take strong action to solve global warming, and they're more there's a stronger force behind the efforts in the State House to take action. So I think that's all some of the reasons why we've been able to lead the way. Let me see if I can switch to the next slide. Okay, so I wanted to touch on the opportunity presented by our new president's incredible leadership. And I just wanted to highlight a few of the things that he's announced so far that have completely changed the dynamics of what's possible in the country, definitely, as well as what's possible in California. So the first thing is one of the first things that the president did was he announced a commitment to 100% zero carbon electricity by 2035. And that was really important because, as you guys probably know, California's we passed SB 100 in 2018 that set us to be the biggest and first state really to be on track to get 100% of our electricity from clean sources. But the timeline that we set back then was to get there by 2045, 25 years ago, 25 years from now. So that is far too slow, as the recent climate crisis has underscored. We need to accelerate the timeline for how quickly we get to this 100% clean energy future. And having the president of the United States set a goal for the whole country that's 10 years faster than California's goal really creates a lot more space for us to call for that change. And so we're now, with more confidence, able to say, if we want to meet the president's goal by 2035, we've got to lead the way here in California. We've got to do more faster here too. The second thing I wanted to highlight that was really big was just a few weeks ago when the president announced a 30 gigawatt offshore wind goal by 2030. And this was huge because for the last 4 years, there's basically been no progress on offshore wind with President Trump in office. He's done everything to block that incredible clean energy source from being utilized. And so this was a complete shift. And it's really notable because it's 30 gigawatts of offshore wind being deployed by 2030. And there is nowhere near the number of leases in place right now to get there. So what it means is we're going to have to accelerate all of the leases for clean offshore wind around the country. And California has a huge potential for offshore wind, and we haven't started tapping into it yet. And so this creates a big opportunity for us to make sure that we're following other countries in this case and taking advantage of that clean energy source. And then the other one that's probably the biggest is the American Jobs Act, the big infrastructure package that the president has proposed. And he's proposed a $2 trillion package, which is a really great investment that we need to really make in clean infrastructure. A lot of the investments are things like the clean energy tax incentives that would really help to jumpstart offshore wind, solar, as well as clean electric vehicles and energy efficiency measures. A little bit of feedback. Can you guys hear that? Oh, it just stopped. Cool. Okay. So then the whole American Jobs Package includes all kinds of infrastructure, not just related to clean energy or climate, but so much of it is about building back better, right? And creating this clean energy future we need to make happen. It's a little bit unclear right now how much of that $2 trillion package is actually going to get, turned into law. The way it's going to work is there'll be many different pieces of the package, different bills. And I think the hope is that the Congress will be able to approve much of it through the budget reconciliation process. And so there'll also be separate policy bills that will be moving as well. And there's been, of course, complete inability for Congress to get any kind of bipartisan action lately. And so there's a big question about whether it can happen, much of the package can happen without some Republican support. And the latest I've heard is that there's a bipartisan effort that's being proposed by some Republicans that would be not on the scale of $2 trillion, but somewhere in the neighborhood of $600 to $800 billion, $600 to $800 billion package that is being proposed from Republicans. And there's actually some appetite from Democrats to really look at that and see if we can get some bipartisan agreement on a bunch of the infrastructure proposal. So we'll have to see how that plays out. That is definitely one area where there's an opportunity for a lot of engagement to make sure that we can get the strongest investment in this clean energy infrastructure we can through the current, infrastructure debate in Congress. And then I wanted to just touch on, I skipped past that one slide, a couple of the big opportunities in our state here in California, where we can take that narrative at the national level and take advantage of it for our state. And so I mentioned already that the president made a really big offshore wind announcement. And there's a bill that I think many of you guys are supporting. I know that the Silicon Valley Youth Climate Action Group has already come on in support. We really appreciate it. And that is the Offshore Wind Development Bill by Assemblymember David Chu, AB 525. And this bill has been amended recently. We thought it might die actually, but the good news is it's going to be heard this week, and we're really hopeful we can get it through the policy committees. And that's for basically requiring the Energy Commission to set an ambitious goal and make a plan for how California can tap into clean offshore wind and have benchmarks for 2030 and 2045. The other thing that is really exciting that's happening is all of the change around our transportation sector. So we need to get to a destination zero carbon, right? Where we're getting from A to B without relying on burning of fossil fuels any longer in order to tackle the biggest climate, the climate crisis. And so we had some good news this past year when Governor Newsom said we're, in the midst of the wildfires, we're not going to sell any more gas vehicles or new gas vehicles starting 2035 in California. And then shortly after that, when the president came into office, when Biden won, we saw a 180 from a lot of the auto industry who'd been blocking progress on this area for years and years. And so finally, General Motors said they're also not going to sell gas vehicles after 2035. So that's all really exciting. And, you know, as I said, California's got half of all the electric vehicles in the country in our state alone, but we've got a long way to go to get to 8 million. I think we're at like 400,000 electric vehicles so far. So a long way to go. But to do it, we really need the infrastructure, and the governor has committed $1.5 billion to a kind of EV infrastructure and clean car package in his FY22 budget. And there's a big question about whether that's going to be able to happen. And there's a lot of opportunity to engage there to make sure we secure that down payment in clean vehicle infrastructure this budget year. So that is a big debate. Another one I wanted to mention was SB 467. And so I think a lot of you might have heard that Senator Wiener and Senator Monique Limon introduced a really landmark bill that would have banned fracking and all of the other really bad extraction methods like fracking starting in 2022, and would also have restricted the permits for oil and gas production within 2,500 feet of residents, schools, healthcare facilities, or long-care institutions. So that bill died last week, which was a huge setback, not only for that bill, but also for our movement overall, I think, for it to die in its very first committee. It's not over yet, but this is an area where it would be really helpful to be doing organizing as well. Basically, the bill may come back and be heard one more time on the 27th if we can secure one more vote in committee. So we need, we lost by one vote. We need at least one more member of that committee to vote yes. That's the Assembly Energy Committee in order to get it passed. Sorry, it's the Senate Energy Committee in order to get it passed. It looks like Senator Eggman has indicated she would be interested in supporting it. She wasn't willing to support the bill as written, and so the version that's going to likely return would include only the setbacks, not the overall ban on fracking in this bill. So we're hopeful we can see that at least happen. That would be a very good step that we could potentially win. And I think the reason it didn't pass, the reason we couldn't get that fifth vote, was that not only was this bill heavily opposed by the fossil fuel interests, but unfortunately it was also opposed by some of the labor groups who felt really scared about the consequences of banning fracking in our state and the consequence to jobs and, you know, the future of their industries. And so that is a really unfortunate reality, and we've got to figure out how to you know, build stronger coalitions, really, so that we can bring labor with us in order to tackle the climate crisis. And then I wanted to also mention that there's a huge fight waging around solar as well in our state. We need to triple the amount of energy coming from solar roofs to get to our 100% clean energy goals, according to the recent report that the Energy Commission released. And that's a huge number, right? We've already got 1.2 million solar roofs. We've got to basically triple that as fast as possible. And that's going to be important for lots of reasons. It also gives us a more resilient grid, especially when you couple it with batteries and like home storage systems. And there's a big question about what the future of solar looks like. I'm mentioning here there's a bill called the Solar Access Act that will help to accelerate solar by getting rid of the cumbersome, slow process for getting permits by making permitting automatic for all cities. So that's a good bill, but there's also a really big fight waging at the Public Utilities Commission about what the future of net metering is going to look like, and that's our Bedrock Solar program. So those are a few of the bills. And then I wanted to also just mention like how you can make a difference and how you can play a role in this fight, in these decisions that are being made. And I think the thing I'll say is, first of all, no, you can play a role, and your voice really does matter on these fights. And I think the best example of this, to remind yourself, is the Greta Thunbergs of the world. And obviously not all of us can be Greta, right? But the fact is, when Greta went out and decided to take action on her own by herself, you know, to say that this climate crisis is urgent and we have to act now, I'm sure any number of us would have said, oh, how is she going to possibly make a difference? But the fact is, she does. And it's not just Greta, but any one of us can do the same thing, which is speak truth to power and talk about why you care about these issues and why you're taking action. And there's been academic studies done now of what that impact is. And the thing that's so remarkable is it doesn't matter what age you are, where you live in the world. You know, if you hear about someone who's taking action because you believe that you can make a difference, it completely changes how people perceive our ability to win and really make change. And so it really is the only way we've been able to be leaders here in California is because of action from people like you, and you can be part of it. I would say speak up like you're already doing in the political process, but also tell other people about it, shine a light on what's happening inside the buildings so that more people know. And the more that everyone knows about it, the public in California is on our side, and that's how we're going to win. So let me just pause there and see if you guys have any questions, if we have time. Sorry, Dia, if I went over.
No, thank you so much. If you don't mind, can I go and have the like a little Q&A slide pop up? So am I, can I screen share real quick, or would you prefer to have your slides up?
I think I paused sharing. Does it work? Oh, wait a minute. Okay, now is that working now?
Yeah. As long as you're okay with me screen sharing for just a moment. Thank you. Wait, hold on. If you do have questions, don't unmute quite yet. We will. You'll get an opportunity in just a moment. Here, so sorry. I need to screen share like this. Okay. Can you all see this, hopefully? Okay, thank you. Okay, well, first of all, thank you so much for your fantastic presentation, Ms. Deehan. That was fantastic. We all really appreciate getting to learn about some of the progress to expect on the state level and Biden's plans with his administration too. We're now going to welcome any audience questions for Ms. Deehan, which you can ask in the chat on Zoom by addressing it to everyone, and on Facebook Live if you're viewing from there. I will ask them momentarily, so please be patient. I need to have an order that they're coming in, but we'll be happy to accept any. So if you want to type it into the chat, please feel free. As we're waiting for some questions to start hopping into the chat, I do have a question for you, Laura. So overall, what lessons have you learned from your involvement with organizations such as CalPRIG and Environment California? Have there been any particular initiatives that have stood out to you or that you've thoroughly enjoyed or have learned a lot from, have made great impact?
Sure, yeah. So I remember on energy, I was actually in college when the last big energy crisis happened in 2001. And at that point, there was it was a really weird time. Suddenly, we didn't know if we were going to be able to keep the lights on. And so we were going to class in the dark sometimes. And it was, you know, all this uncertainty, and everyone was kind of freaking out around the state about how, you know, how would you keep your food when the freezer's turning off? And we've experienced this again recently, right, with the power outages around all the wildfires and you know, working to reduce wildfire liabilities, etc. Anyway, at that time we thought, gosh, we need to make sure we have you know, well, basically there was a big opportunity to focus on energy in our state that was kind of unprecedented. And so we decided to push for a more diverse energy mix that included renewables, because at that point we'd only about 1% of our electricity coming from renewables. And so we started running a campaign where we called for a diverse renewable portfolio, right, of lots of different kinds of energy, so that you weren't so dependent on any one kind. And through that campaign, we were taking on some pretty powerful interest to push for more renewables in the state. And we had to do a lot of education, public education, about how we could, in fact, power our lives from wind and solar in California. But you know, that these technologies were ready to go. So we would do demonstrations on things like, you know, how solar worked, like making solar smoothies and educational events like that. We made giant props and went on tours with them around the state and did press conferences as part of our spring break. And then we ended up being able to get the first renewable electricity standard passed in California that got us on track. First, it was just 20% by 2017. And then we were able to expand that goal. It was kind of like that first goal got us that first step on the ladder, that rung on the ladder. We were able to build from there to 33%, you know, by 2030. And then we accelerated that to get to now 100%, you know, clean energy is the goal. So that it was just amazing to see that, you know, by pushing for real reform, given, you know, and whatever the political climate is at the time, the best thing we can get done, we can make real change and change the trajectory for energy in the state. So that's one of the campaigns I'm really excited that I got to be part of.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's really inspiring to hear how the movement for energy really has stemmed up. You know, we have humble beginnings too, as amazing as California is. We do have a really good question that came from the audience from Mr. Jeffrey Fairfield. He asks, how would you contend with labor being worried about a loss of jobs? Are there any recommendations that you have for legislators so that way they can craft policy that could appease labor and our need to make changes to combat the climate crisis?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Jeffrey, a really hard question, honestly. And it's the one that's on my mind a lot right now. I think a lot of us are really pretty devastated that the thing that got in the way of the fracking bill was labor in part. And it shows that there's a real uphill battle to be able to work together with all powerful groups of people, you know, to solve these problems. And so I think that one of the things I'm hopeful about are the opportunities to work together, hand in hand with labor organizations. And I think there's a lot of potential there in building this clean energy economy. Clearly, President Biden sees that too, you know, calling the infrastructure package the American Jobs Act. And here in California, Environment California sponsoring the offshore wind bill, for example, with the same union that killed the fracking bill, the building trades. And we are so excited to be working very closely in partnership with them on this vision of how we power our lives with this clean energy. I think there's a lot of opportunity for partnership around clean cars and how we completely transition our transportation system to be 100% clean as well, that destination zero carbon. And I think on some of these harder things where we're talking about jobs going away, like that's the hard rub here, right? If we're retiring the fossil fuel industry, that is going to mean some people who are highly trained in their current job, they won't be able to do that job forever. I think that, you know, that it just creates this this reality, you know, there's definitely going to be some people that will oppose because of that. And I think that there's a big effort underway right now also to make sure that there is a kind of what's called a just transition, you know, making sure that there's good work training programs, apprenticeship programs to train highly skilled people in some of these new industries as they're coming up. But I have to say, I don't think it's going to be easy. I think this is really the crux of some of the challenges, the kind of fault lines that we're moving to, you know, over.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for that insightful answer, Laura. And to anyone else who still has remaining questions, unfortunately, we're out of time for this Q&A section, but Ms. Deehan, if you felt inclined, you could put your email in the chat or have some other way to have people contact you with any questions that they have left. So I'm sorry we can't have it answered live. We're going to need to transition. But overall, thank you so much, Ms. Deehan. That was a fantastic presentation and some great questions that you got to answer for us.
Thank you, Deehan. Thanks so much for having me. Good luck with the rest of your event.
Thank you. Thank you. I will pass it off to my co-MC, Jared.
Thank you. Once again, thank you to Laura. It was a very important and informational presentation, and we all appreciate it. We will now be moving to Girish Balachandran. a municipal veteran when it comes to the public power industry. Mr. Balachandran brings a wealth of knowledge from his nearly 3 decades in the energy sector, serving as an assistant general manager for the City of Palo Alto Utilities and general manager of Riverside Public Utilities and Alameda Municipal Power. Mr. Balachandran has transformed these agencies into thriving systems renowned for resident satisfaction and environmental preservation. As the CEO of Silicon Valley Clean Energy since 2018, he has helped the SVCE team and the community achieve ambitious decarbonization goals with regards to electric supply, built environment, transportation, and more. In his presentation, Mr. Balachandran will be explaining the role that community choice energy providers play in our local community and state level to address climate change, including its impact and innovations. So without further ado, I now give the floor to Mr. Girish Balachandran.
Thank you very much. First of all, I appreciate the invitation to speak to this really passionate and motivated group. And let me share my screen. And if you stop sharing yours, yep. That's it. Okay. So I really enjoyed the previous speaker too. And in a way to frame what I'm going to talk about, I think a lot of what she was talking about was policy. And over here at SVCE, you'll see how policy turns into action. And we're doing a lot of cool stuff in the community choice movement. So I'll go over that. So this is kind of the overview of what I'm going to talk about, not just on clean electricity that powers a lot of our appliances, et cetera, but also talk about how we can look to reduce emissions in the building sector and the transportation sector. So just to kind of step back and kind of tell you how this business works in our country. The electricity business, essentially you have either the left column or the right column are the existing providers of electricity. They're either investor-owned utilities or municipal utilities. And so you can see over here, both these entities are what we call vertically integrated. The CCA movement essentially comes in where government agencies collaborate and create a new agency that gets into the business of purchasing power. And over here, I'll tell you why we've done it at SVCE. So this is what CCA does. The investor-owned utility, or IOU, continues to maintain transmission lines. From a national standpoint, you can see that several states have introduced laws that allow for community choice aggregation. Many of them are kind of have different flavors. California has its own flavor, and we have several that are considering CCAs too. So here's what it looks like in California. So when you see all the green shaded areas, those are basically entities that have active CCAs. Others are in the process of getting served. And today we have 24 CCAs serving 11 million Californians. And outside, the first one was started in 2010. The second started in 2013. And then there was just an explosion of CCAs starting in 2016. So in the Bay Area, these are the CCAs, or community choice aggregators. So we have 8 of us here. And in Northern California as a whole, in PG&E service territory, we serve close to 50% of the energy load. So here's the impact that CCAs have had in California. So the numbers kind of speak for itself, right? So this is when you think about renewable energy, this is the kind, these are the contracts that we have signed for renewable energy in the aggregate. It's pretty impressive, but this is actually nothing compared to what's coming up. So let me step back a little bit and talk to you about energy and what the basics of this energy system looks like. So you and we all are really living at a super exciting time. As much as we have a climate crisis, this crisis really unlocks creativity, it unlocks cooperation, and kind of what you're going to be doing today by taking policy positions. That's perfect, because you're going to be putting pressure on those who have power to change policy, which will make it hopefully easier for agencies such as ours that have a mission to reduce emissions to do our job more effectively and more affordably. So here's a cartoon kind of deal with the grid, where you have, for the most part, most electricity is generated far away from where we live, or the load centers. This gets taken to us through large transmission lines, brought into the load centers near cities, to giant distribution centers, and then it finally comes to your home, or it goes to businesses over distribution lines that are either overhead or underground. And the utility meters how much you use, and you typically get a bill at the end of the month. So this grid, if stepping back even further, this is what the United States looks like in the sense of what we call Nerc Interconnections. Nerc is the short form of the abbreviation for the National Electric Reliability Corporation. In order for all these generators to work together, electricity generators to work together, you need to have someone coordinating all these generators. It's the equivalent of an air traffic controller. So you have an airport, right? And you have different airlines landing and taking off, but you need to have some third party figuring out, okay, who's landing when, who's taking off when, to make sure that that infrastructure is used effectively. And that's essentially what each of these interconnections do. So we in California live in the WEC interconnection, which is the Western Electric Coordination Council. And so this goes all the way from Canada down to Mexico. So it's pretty large. It's actually, from a technical standpoint, running the electricity grid is pretty cool. So many of us, when we think of electricity, we think of flipping the switch and we have electricity come in, right? But there's a lot that goes behind that. So one way, a metaphor, which like many metaphors will break down, but I think for the purposes of understanding the grid and renewable energy, it's very important for you all to understand, is think of a swimming pool, and that's the grid. It has electrons coming from all kinds of energy sources. So here we've showed you conventional energy, right? So you have conventional to be coal. We still have about 30% of the electricity produced in the United States comes from coal. You have natural gas. Both of these fuels we want to get rid of over the next several years, 20 years or so. But right now, we also have renewable energy. So you have the energy from renewable electrons coming from conventional energy. They go into this grid, and from the grid, it gets pulled out. The thing that makes this complicated, think of a swimming pool where you have to keep the surface flat all the time. So regardless of how people are sucking water out of a pool or dumping water into a pool, it has to be kept flat. And that's what these agencies like WEC do. And that's what makes it very critical for us as a agency serving a lot of Silicon Valley to make sure that the lights stay on even when renewable energy is not being produced. So a lot of technical stuff, but it'll have some context later on when we talk about policy. So here are clean electricity sources. Pretty obvious: wind, solar, hydro, and geothermal. California has a certain definition for renewable energy. California, for the most part, does not consider hydropower to be renewable energy. However, they consider it to be clean energy. And that's part of what the previous speaker was talking about getting to the year 2045 with clean energy. So the law basically says you can get a lot of it from renewables, but you can also get a significant fraction from clean energy. So how do we use clean energy at home and on the road? So our recipe for a clean energy community, starts with the electric system. Let's get the electric system cleaned up. So when you get back to that swimming pool analogy, we want more and more of the electrons that go into the grid to be coming from cleaner sources and having less electrons coming from these conventional sources. So that's what we want to do. We want to increase the fraction of green electrons coming in to a point where at some point in the future, we'll have all or nearly all coming from clean. And this basically drives your living and your community to be clean when you can do everything at home. So the use of buildings and operating buildings and transportation that can also be electric. As long as your electricity is clean, having EVs would also essentially be clean. So this is how we get electricity to your homes and to businesses. We buy and build energy supplies. We use Pacific Gas and Electric, PG&E's transmission lines to get it to you. So what have we done at SVCE so far on clean electricity? So on this chart, sorry, it's you're going to get the slide presentation later. So you'll see here everything in the green and teal is either solar or solar plus energy storage. The orange is geothermal. And just today at noon, the SVCE Clean Energy Board approved our latest contract, which was for a wind contract. So now we have wind as part of our portfolio too. And what's the impact of the SVCE CCA? First, we reduced our CO2 emissions by 24%. So when you look at CO2 emissions for the decade past, it's basically been flat to growing. And then once SVCE took over the supply of electricity for more than half of Santa Clara County, the emissions for 13 of our cities came down dramatically. We've invested more than $1 billion in renewable energy projects. As of today, it's about 1.3. And customers have saved more than 69 million in bill savings because we've priced our electricity at somewhere between 1% to 6% under PG&E. So talking about how we get to all electric living and transportation, the SVCE board adopted what you see in the bottom left of your screen. It's a roadmap for how we can decarbonize our transportation and building sectors in addition to the electric sector. Because this journey to getting to a clean grid and a clean economy is going to be a couple of decades long, and it's going to require a lot of planning and a lot of money and a lot of pushing and making sure things get done. So we have a roadmap that we've been implementing over the last couple of years. And this slide shows the emissions in SVCE. I'm sorry, I don't have the y-axis, but basically, I haven't labeled the y-axis, I should say. This is basically, if you look at the bottom of each bar, it shows you how much electricity we use. And you can see from 2015, that teal at the bottom of the bar is really reduced. But what you'll see that hasn't changed really from 2015, and even when we forecast out to 2030, you'll see that the transportation and the natural gas portions of these bars haven't changed very much. And in order to make this change where we get to that bottom red dotted line by 2050, it's going to require unprecedented change from us. So this is a huge challenge given the slope of the arrow from the past several years. How are we going to get to that 2050 mark? So most of the cities, most of the homes in Silicon Valley use natural gas and electricity for energy, but this is changing due to initiatives that we've taken at SVCE. For example, a better building code. I'm not sure how many of you are aware, but every 3 years, the entire state has to update their building codes. And essentially what that does is every time the code is updated, every house that is built after that or has a major remodel has to follow the latest code. So if each of our cities basically adopts a very ambitious building code that encourages clean electricity and discourages the use of fossil fuels, we can clean up the use of energy in buildings much faster. So SVC was a leader. Our board basically got onto this very early, and it was a 2-year process. And as of today, we have 12 of our 13 agencies that have adopted building codes. And all over California, we have 40 cities that have done this. This is a picture just showing you, natural gas, your hot showers in the morning. 95% of you have hot showers that are powered by natural gas. Most of us do our cooking using natural gas. Some of us drive using natural gas. The problem is natural gas adds to the CO2 problem. And when you use natural gas inside your home, you're also breathing in unhealthy air inside the home. And this is a national issue. It's not just the flaring of natural gas or the use of natural gas. It's the leakage of methane from where natural gas is fracked and transported. So this is what we want to do. We want to live electric, drive electric, and that's where when it comes to transportation also, we need to move to all electric while making sure that our electricity grid is all clean. So over here, you see the yellow shaded areas, the amount of transportation emissions that we have, and we need to reduce that dramatically. In order to do that, we need to encourage not just EVs, but EV charging to make that just as easy as filling up gasoline. And so we are spending $12 million over the next 2 years to install more than 100 DC fast chargers and more than 1,000 level 2 chargers over our territory. And across San Mateo and Santa Clara County, it's going to be $65 million spent on this over the next 2 years. And so when it comes to buildings, we've also started something called the Future Fit Home. So when we start to talk about the Future Fit Home, it's really to get people to understand everything you do in terms of the use of fuel in your home, you can do with basically clean sources. So all electric living over here, whether it's your transportation, powering your home, doing your laundry, your showers, you can do it all, and cooling, you can do it all with electric. We've transformed our website. We call it the eHub, which basically, the whole point of our website is to inspire people to make the change to all electric and all clean electric, to educate them on what's needed, and then finally allow them to act. So today you can actually go onto our website and you can get a $75 rebate for an induction stovetop. You can find out, you can basically go to our website and we will give you like a concierge service to install solar and storage at your home. We'll also help you select an EV. So these are ways in which we can get you to actually participate in this clean energy transition. But wait, there's more. We also have clean energy innovation. There's a lot of thinking around how electricity is delivered that's based on thinking from many years ago and decades ago. and you also have incumbents who have a lot of power who don't want to change anything. So one of the things we are trying to do at SVCE, and our board has directed us to do this, is basically, hey, we're in the middle of one of the most innovative regions in the world. How can we tap into that ecosystem to experiment and prototype very cool and cutting edge projects that then can be replicated at scale? So our website has several of those examples, and we run hackathons, and we do something called an innovation on-ramp and innovation partners, where we work with a number of different innovators to get clean energy innovations into the market. So I will wrap up there. And as I wrap up and wait for questions, I also want to mention something very important which came up at the last speaker too. As we do this, we need to make sure that affordability is also looked at, right? So it's almost like everything's possible, but at what price? So that's one of the things we look at. It's not just greening up as fast as we can, but we want to make sure that the energy we provide is affordable, and we also make sure that our system is reliable. We don't want blackouts like we had last year, and we don't want blackouts like what Texas had earlier this year. So with that, I will stop and hopefully get some questions.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Balachandran. And I think we all really appreciate all the helpful things that you mentioned, especially what SVCE can do to promote the transition to clean energy. So if anyone in the audience has a question, please type it in the chat and we can ask it. But just to start off with a question that's already been prepared beforehand. Oh, actually, we do have a question in the chat regarding nuclear energy. Perhaps you have any ideas regarding the future of nuclear energy with regards to the transition to clean energy?
Yeah, I think nuclear, this is my personal opinion. It doesn't reflect the opinion of my board. I do think nuclear energy should play a part in the future, but in California, for all practical purposes, it's dead, because a law was passed in the 70s which banned the construction of nuclear until the problem of nuclear waste could be solved. And the problem of nuclear waste isn't going to get solved anytime soon. So unless we overturn that law, we're not really going to get anywhere. So in the meantime, I think we continue to work on all these other strategies we have, while we also consider nuclear. Nuclear has to be dealt with at the federal level. It's going to be almost impossible to do it at the state level.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I guess another question would be, so it is the general consensus in like the international science community that the world has nearly 10 years to implement the environmental protections needed to prevent irreversible environmental damage. So based on your experience as a CEO of SVCE, what do you think needs to be done to ensure that both the general public understands this and also that we take the necessary action both in the local level as well as the state and national level?
Wow, that's a giant question, Jared. Thank you for that. That's a lot. I can say maybe the most powerful thing you all can do, the young people in the audience can do, is do what you're doing right now, which is push for policies that get this change to happen fast. But while you're doing it, the reality is you have to make sure that it's reliable and affordable. We've had a lot of affordability is a big deal. So keep that in mind as you're moving your policy options forward. I know that you're going to be voting on a number of bills. One other thing I would say that you could do to support how a community can move things forward is having CCAs be stable entities. There was a bill, SB 612, that has been introduced by Senator Portantino. Everyone in the Silicon Valley delegation is a co-author of that bill. That's a bill that will help set a fundamental stable structure that will allow us to move forward. Other than that, I'm just going to point you to say, come to our website. We have an integrated resource plan, our decarbonization roadmap, where we talk about how we can clean up buildings, cleaning up transportation, and cleaning up electricity. It's all got to be done. At the same time, you want to do it in an affordable and reliable manner.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, we are nearing 8 o'clock, so we will have to finish up for now. But thank you for presenting. Oh, actually, we do have more questions, so perhaps we can do one more question. This question was from Brian Haberly. And it's if federal proposals or state proposals could increase incentives or rebates to promote electrification. So perhaps.
Yeah, I'll actually combine that with the previous question, which is about local reach codes. They're both kind of heading the same direction. I think you're right. It's got to be carrot and stick. You can go to our website and look at our reach code effort. We basically have model ordinances. And if you're in the Silicon Valley, in the Santa Clara area or San Mateo area, pretty much every city has adopted it. But if you're in any other county in California, go to our website. We have all the information in there. You can basically use it as a playbook to take it into your local communities. It's just there. So please copy and paste.
All right, great, thank you. So that is all for our questions now. Thank you for presenting and for all the information that you provided. We will now be transitioning to SVYCA's transit team and their lead, Monica Mallon, a graduate of San Jose State University and a current member of both the Cambrian Community Council and Silicon Valley Transit users. Monica spent the last few years advocating for more sustainable transportation options throughout Santa Clara County, and in her presentation, she'll be presenting important VTA legislation and ideas of which we should all pay close attention to.
Hey everybody, thanks so much for the introduction. Yeah, my name is Monica and I'm part of the transit team at Silicon Valley Youth Climate Action. And I'm going to be talking about the transit team and what we've done in the past and what we hope to do in the future. And I'll also be answering questions at the end, so please leave them in the chat. And just for a little bit of background, we started the transit team in 2019 because we wanted to improve transit since cars and trucks are the largest source of emissions in our county. We wanted to make it easier for people to get around in a sustainable way and especially help young people get around, since students a lot of the time either are too young to drive or can't afford cars. So personally, I've relied on transit my entire life, and while I really appreciate it because it has allowed me to access jobs and opportunities and school and saved me a lot of money, saved me a lot of debt, it's also really a struggle sometimes. It can take hours to go 10 miles, and that's just if the schedules line up. It can take 2 hours sometimes for a really short trip. And from experiencing transit in other cities and other countries, I know that we can do better. I know that we can create something that will actually work for people. As was said in the introduction, we're really focused on improving transit and getting different policies passed at VTA. Something that we worked on was a climate emergency, and we're really trying to get more service out. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, the financial situation isn't that great. So we've really shifted our focus to preventing transit cuts, and restoring service. So throughout the pandemic, VTA has reduced service a number of times to the point where now 1,000 transit riders are being left behind, stranded every single day because of a lack of service and because of social distancing. This is a really huge issue because there's only so many times where you can be late to work before you buy a car or find some other option. So we really see this as a huge issue, and we've been working with other advocacy groups, other climate groups, and ATU to get service restored as soon as possible, hopefully before schools reopen, especially so that students that rely on transit can get to school. And to even have a shot at making transit better in the future, we really need to get service restored and, give ridership the opportunity to come back. So that's what we've been working on, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Monica, did you want to share your letter to the VTA Board of Directors that you propose we sign on to, which we will vote on at the end of this meeting?
Yeah, sure. So the letter, I think it was linked earlier in the chat, but essentially the letter is asking VTA to come up with some sort of plan to get service out faster. ATU has given VTA some ideas on how to do this, including having trainings on weekends as well. So there are some opportunities that are available to do that, but the letter is essentially, explaining why it's important to get service out and asking them to do what's necessary.
Thank you, Monica.
Okay, I think that's all the questions that have been asked. We will now, so thank you for the presentation. We will now be moving on lastly to SVYCA's state advocacy team, which was formed last year, and this team has already made massive impact, including fostering the passage of Assemblymember Phil Ting's AB 841, which leverages existing state energy funds to make water safer to drink in public schools, reduce energy costs, accelerate the installation of charging infrastructure for electric vehicles, and reduce the largest source of air pollution to make our air healthier to breathe. So now the team's co-leads, Gary, Cece, and AJ, will now present a list of endorsements and its content from the California legislature.
Hi, everyone. My name is AJ. I'm a co-lead of the Silicon Valley Youth Climate Action State Advocacy Team. And first of all, we'd just like to start off by thanking our team advisors, Kevin, Ma, Hoy, and Dan Jacobson, for helping us with our research and strategy. We've also been collaborating with a lot of climate groups to identify a target list of bills, since there are hundreds of them on the legislature. And we'd like to thank Sierra Club, Environment California, and 350 Silicon Valley's local chapters of the Silicon Valley Fuel-Free Building Coalition for their collaboration and support. And there are also 4 bills authored by Senator Cortese we support and already received endorsement from the Silicon Valley Democratic Club, which we won't be going over today. Today, we're going to be covering 25 bills. I'm going to go over the first 8 bills, and Cece and Gary will cover the rest, and we'll have a few minutes at the end for questions. And I'm told at the end of the event, the Silicon Valley Democratic Club members will have an opportunity to vote for a resolution to endorse the slate of bills. So I'd like to start off with SB 67, which is the 24/7 Clean Energy Standard, which sets interim targets for 85% clean energy by 2030 and 90% by 2035, on the path to have 100% by 2045. This bill also specifies that the 100% target really means 100% by 2045, not leaving out 10% of electricity that could still be generated by gas plants in 2045, according to today's law. The next bill we'd like to endorse would be SB 68, which is key for reducing greenhouse gas emissions from buildings and transportation by making it easier for building and homeowners to install electrical equipment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in support of the state's climate goals. The next bill is SB 345, which steers more energy efficient and distributed energy technology programs to low-income and disadvantaged communities to increase electrification of homes in these communities, which most need it, and the people who can least afford to invest it in their own. The next bill is SB 596, which would reduce 40% of greenhouse gas emissions from cement and concrete sector by 2030 and net zero by 2045. Since concrete and cement are one of the most commonly used building materials globally, and they're a current large source of greenhouse gas emissions. The next bill is SB 612, which is make the fee to switch to clean energy more transparent, which would require all investor-owned utility energy generation to be equally available for community choice aggregators in proportion to how much the latter pays the former via the PCIA. For the next bill, it would be SB 260, which requires corporations making $1 billion in revenue, more than $1 billion in revenue that do business in California to report their greenhouse gas emissions to the Air Resources Board, who will develop and adopt regulations requiring these large corporations to set emissions targets by 2044, thereby enabling the Air Resources Board to sort of see which companies are having the largest impact on greenhouse gas emissions and specifically regulate certain companies. The next bill is SB 617, which requires local jurisdictions of greater than 10,000 to implement automatic permitting for small solar panels by 2023, with the Energy Commission providing grants using money from utilities. And the last bill I'm going over would be SB 1, which is the Sea Level Rise Mitigation and Adaptation Act, which would mandate the California Coastal Commission include sea level rise in their decision making, and would also require a more cohesive approach to tackling rising seas by calling for local government and regional and statewide offices to collaborate. Moving on, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, AJ. Okay, so next on the list, we endorse SB 437 by Senator Wikoski. It is about local publicly owned electric utilities, integrated resource planning, transportation, electrification. So it requires the publicly owned utilities to explicitly provide for all sectors of transportation electrification, such as including light, medium, heavy duty, and on and off road engines into their integrated resource plans to ensure comprehensive electricity rate design in response to the Executive Order B5516 by Governor Brown in 2018, which established a new statewide goal to achieve carbon neutrality as soon as possible and no later than 2045. Next on the list, we have AB 416 by Assemblymember Cara. It is the Deforestation Free Procurement Act. So it basically requires contractors to ensure their materials do not have any deforestation impact by 2024, which is in response to the fact that currently people are logging in the boreal forest, which contains some of the most biggest carbon reservoir that will emit a lot of CO2 and will accelerate the global warming. Next on the list, we have AB 525 by Assemblymember Chu. It is investing in offshore wind power. So it will task the Energy Commission to plan 10 megawatts of offshore wind energy by 2040 and communicate with other agencies to ensure the infrastructure can be supported and to increase renewable energy and supplement solar. Next on the list, we endorse AB 1346 by Assemblymember Berman. It is the transition gas powered leaf to zero emission alternatives. So it bans emissions from new small off-road engines such as carbon equipment by 2024 and creates a rebate program for air quality management districts to phase out existing engines. Next on the list, we endorse AB 377 by Assemblymember Rivas. It is the California Clean Water Act. So this bill will invigorate the original intent of the Federal Clean Water Act adopted nearly 50 years ago and put California on track to restore its water by 2050 by establishing a three-pronged framework to improve water quality in California waters. Next on the list, we endorse AB 73 by Assemblymember Rivas, but it is also co-authored by Assemblymember Cara. It is the Farm Worker Wildfire Smoke Protections Act. So this will task CalStrike team to gather agricultural worker monthly totals to plan and distribute N95 masks during wildfire smoke emergencies. Additionally, it will require employers to conduct training on air quality and safety with Cal to create a wildfire smoke strike team to enforce
air quality regulations. So next on the list, we endorse AB 567 by Assemblymember Bauer Kahan. It is about the pesticides, specifically neonicotinoid prohibited use. So this bill will prohibit the use of neonicotinoid pesticide because this pesticide are dangerous to public health and the environment and have been linked to the decline of honeybee populations.
All right, thanks, Cece. For the last couple of bills, they'll be focused mainly around waste management. So the first one is SB 38, and it targets beverage containers. Essentially, it shifts the responsibility of recycling and collection from the consumer to distributors and manufacturers. And it also sets an 85% redemption goal. Following that is SB 557, and it targets treated wood waste. So treated wood is wood that usually comes into contact with the ground or with water. So usually a chemical preservative is applied to the wood. But when this treated wood comes to the end of its life cycle and it's not disposed of properly, it can contaminate water sources, which can lead to cancer in humans. And so this bill would essentially mandate that wholesalers and retailers of treated wood post information about the dangers of it to consumers, as well as having the wood preserving industry publish information about handling, disposal, and a list of collection facilities and have them updated annually so consumers have access to that information. The next bill is SB 54. It is the Plastic Pollution Producer Responsibility Act, and it sets two ambitious targets. The first one is that by 2032, all single-use packaging and products must be recyclable or compostable. And number two, there must be a 75% reduction in waste that comes from recycling, reduction, and composting. Following that is AB 881, and this targets a loophole in recycling reform. It specifies that exporting mixed plastic waste does not equal recycling. And that's because a lot of plastic coming from the US has been found to be exported to other countries such as Southeast Asia. However, in these countries, they don't have sufficient infrastructure to process that waste. And often the waste will end up in landfills or being burned. And when plastic waste is burned, it can be really impactful to human health. It can cause birth defects, impacts the endocrine system, among many others. Following that is AB 622, as well as AB 802, and both of these bills are combating microfiber pollution. So these bills mandate by 2024, all new washing machines sold in California must have a microfiber filtration system that at most lets particles of up to 100 microns pass through. And this must apply to industrial, institutional, as well as commercial clothes washing. And so this is a big issue because the number one source of microplastics in the ocean come from washing synthetic textiles. And these microplastic particles can pass through wastewater treatment plants, and and when ocean animals ingest them, it can cause them to change their feeding behavior, which leads to starvation and less reproduction, which will very negatively impact the many seaside communities here in California. Following that is AB 1276, which reduces unnecessary food serviceware, and this is very similar to what's already happening with straws in California. So if you go to a restaurant and you order a drink, you will not be given a drink with a straw unless you specifically ask for one. And this bill essentially does the same thing, but applies it to single-use food utensils. And this can, by sort of reducing this and only offering them at a request, it can save each restaurant anywhere from $3,000 to $21,000 every year. So there's a lot of savings there. Following that is SB 343, which tackles truth in labeling for recyclable materials. Specifically, it puts restraints on the use of the word recyclable, as well as the chasing arrow symbol, which is like the three arrows pointing in a triangle shape. Essentially, it makes sure that companies can't use those terms unless it follows the product that they're selling follows specific criteria made by CalRecycle. Following that is AB 818, which targets baby wipes. So by 2022, all disposable baby wipes sold in California must have the labels "do not flush" on them. And this bill also implements a educational outreach program that lasts until 2027 to sort of inform the consumers and users of baby wipes that you can't flush them down the toilet. And the reason why this is such a big issue is that baby wipes don't break down in water, so it ends up clogging plumbing at home as well as waste treatment plants. And just as for like context of how big of an issue this is, New York City spends $19 million each year on just repairing damages associated with flushing baby wipes. And finally, the last bill we have for today is AB 1201, which targets composting. And so this bill is very similar to SB 343, which targets truth in labeling for recyclable materials. However, this bill applies it to compostable materials, and it applies to the specific terms compostable, soil degradable, as well as home compostable uses on everyday goods. And that is it for our 25 bills.
Okay, yeah, great presentation. And you guys explained all the bills very detailed. And so if anyone in the audience has any questions for the state advocacy co-leads, please enter them into the chat now. And if not, we will be moving into the closing part of our meeting. So it does not look like there are any questions in the chat. So we will be moving on, and I will transition things back to my co-MC Deehan to begin the closing part.
Great. Thank you so much, Jared, as well as AJ, CC, and Gary for this important and impressive information. Let's give a quick virtual applause to not only the SVYCA legislative team, but also the SVYCA transit team and our two amazing guest speakers from earlier, Mr. Balachandran and Ms. Deehan. So everyone, real quickly, let's give a round of applause. We had some amazing presentations today. Thank you so much. So overall, we hope that you walk away from today's insightful presentations with key climate advocacy knowledge and skills that you can use in our shared fight for a better future. And regardless of whether you're a student or adult, one easy way to continue that advocacy is to join us at Silicon Valley Youth Climate Action. Join us by signing on to our SVYCA mailing list. You can find our mailing list on our website link, which will be posted in the chat. And whether you're making change in your communities with advocacy teams like SVYCA, or informing yourself, friends, and family with the progress of climate organizations such as Silicon Valley Clean Energy or Environment California. Overall, it's important that we continue to push for the action that our climate demands. And with that, on behalf of SVYCA, the Silicon Valley Democratic Club, and the Sunnyvale Democratic Club, we would like to sincerely thank you for your time, for attending, and wish you a happy Earth Day, a happy Earth Week, in fact. Good night. And for those of you who are SVDC members, please stay to vote for 3 resolutions. Jenny will provide information, and I'll pass it on to her. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Deehan and Jared and Monica, CC, AJ, and Gary. Just incredibly fantastic presentation. So much information and presented so clearly. We really, really appreciate you leading this and organizing it. Also, Hoi Poon from our environmental committee, who was our primary contact on our side for always helping us get these great climate bills. So we're going to be voting on a couple of items. The first is on the VTA letter that Monica described. So I'm going to go ahead and put the link to that in the chat. We'll also be voting on the slate of bills that were presented. So if there's any, it looks like there was no questions, but if there are, this would be a final opportunity to ask. Okay, so I'm going to make a motion that we vote to co-sign on the VTA letter that, as described in the link in the chat, and also to endorse the slate of bills. I'll post the link in the chat again to that as well. And we can go ahead. What's that?
Second.
Thanks, Michelle. So Jeff, if you can launch the poll. And we'll leave the poll open for 1 minute. If you're a member in good standing, your vote will be counted. Okay, the poll is closed and both motions passed unanimously. So thank you. So thanks again for your presentations. We do have one more business item for the Silicon Valley Democratic Club members, and that is a resolution condemning the statement made by Santa Clara County Assessor Larry Stone. I will post where the statement was originally reported in the chat, and also repost the link to the resolution language prior to reading it out loud.
So Jenny, just a logistics question. When will the meeting recording be available?
Go ahead, Jeff.
So we'll have a link for the e-board directly after the meeting. And then Ed Cobb normally edits the audio, so the general membership will probably get it within a few weeks.
Okay, yeah, no, I was just interested because I was working and just listening to the, I wanted to go more thoroughly over the slides that the environmental committee that was here presented. I just want to review those.
So Zoom could take up to like a couple hours to render the video.
Oh, no, that's fine. That's fine. In the next couple of days, is good. I just want to share with others.
Thank you.
Can we move on? We were on an item of business.
Okay, so the resolution that's being presented tonight is the resolution condemning the statement made by Santa Clara County Assessor Larry Stone. Whereas Santa Clara County Assessor Larry Stone is quoted in a media report as having said, the assessor's candidate Gary Kremen is sucking the tit of the union. That's what the whole race will be about. And whereas Stone's statement is deeply offensive and reflects a profound lack of respect for and antipathy towards women and workers, including those over whom he has authority as assessor. Therefore, be it resolved that the Santa Clara County Silicon Valley Democratic Club condemns the offensive, sexist, misogynistic, and anti-worker statement made by Santa Clara County Assessor Larry Stone and calls on him to resign from office and apologize to all those targeted and offended by his statement. So I do see a typo. It has the Democratic Party in there. It should be the Silicon Valley Democratic Club. I'm going to hand it over to the author to make the motion. Michelle.
Good evening, fellow Democrats. I'm Michelle Dauber, and I am here proposing this resolution. The county party is considering a similar resolution, and a yes vote today will enable the Silicon Valley Democratic Club to join that resolution. First, what Stone said is degrading to women. Stone used vulgar language to show contempt for women's bodies. Second, what Stone said is insulting to our brothers and sisters in the House of Labor. Organized labor is the backbone of the middle class and is the backbone of the Democratic Party. I find this comment, in my opinion, to be a disgrace to Democrats. Third, this is not Larry Stone's first highly offensive comment. In 1998, the Metro quoted him in a May 7th cover story. Stone described then mayoral candidate Tom Gonzalez as, quote, this is a quote, a minority candidate that the business sector trusts. They don't believe he's the stereotypical minority politician that's going to take the city checkbook to the barrio. And I just want to repeat that. They don't believe Gonzalez, that is the stereotypical minority politician that's going to take the city checkbook to the barrio. There's no excuse for what Larry Stone said in the past, and there's no excuse for what he said last week. It is time for us Democrats to hold him accountable please vote yes on this resolution.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
So I'll now open it up for discussion. Anybody who would like to speak on this issue, please raise your hand and you will have 1 minute. Is there any discussion?
I apologize. I'm driving. Can I raise my hand?
Yes. Go ahead,
you.
Olivia. You have a minute.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm appalled upon listening to this. And just a small correction, Michelle, it's Ron Gonzalez.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. You know, we all know that it's even more difficult for people of color to run for office. And it's degrading to hear that someone would qualify as a passable candidate for whatever reason. So I will be supporting this motion and seconding that. I don't believe that, I believe a formal apology to our community is much needed, and shame on Mr. Stone. Shame on you. I'm very disappointed in this, and I can't believe that this is the first time I heard that, but it's been a long time, right? And he's been there a long time.
That's time, Olivia. Thank you.
Thank you.
So next I see Pete.
So I just want to add my support for this resolution. I think it's a reprehensible statement, and it's probably indicative of retrograde thinking. And, you know, it's just inexcusable. And I support labor. I support women. I support every marginalized community that has been oppressed by this kind of patriarchal behavior for generations. And it's time as Democrats that we take a stand against this stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Jenny Higgins.
Hello, Democrats. I just wanted to say I'm in support of the motion. I'm also on the executive board of Dawn, and we are going to be returning money that he donated and stand with the resolution. I know that I was attending a Santa Clara County School Board meeting, and he made a comment to Claudia Rossi, the president of the board, about her actions against Joe DeSalva, that she was doing it because she wanted to change the complexion of the board. So I think there's been some blatant racist marks and some kind of under the tone. And it was a long time ago, that one Michelle gave, but I think there's probably more that we don't even know about. So I think this is an appropriate motion and I support it.
Thank you, Jenny. I see Tom Morin in the comments is having some technical difficulty. Do you want to unmute yourself and speak?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, this is clearly not a sexist remark. It's an idiomatic English phrase. I'm surprised that so many people don't recognize it. It's in the Urban Dictionary. It does suggest that it is perhaps an unusual, in this day and age, idiomatic phrase. So we should all be very careful about using a more limited variety of English. But I think to imply that this is a sexist comment and so forth, I think shows a total lack of understanding of what was meant or what the phrase means. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Next up, I see Ali has their hand up.
Hi, my name is Ali Saberman, and I am one of the co-chairs for Stonewall Democrats. We actually happen to be taking up this resolution soon with our e-board, but tonight I'm speaking on behalf of myself. this statement is obscene. And it's obscene that this statement is happening at the same time we have a wonderful, powerful woman like Jean Cohen running our union. To make a statement like this against unions and a person who hasn't even announced whether or not they are running is absolutely absurd. And it's a complete disgrace to our community. So I will be supporting this motion tonight, and I hope you do too.
Thank you, Ally. Rosie?
Yeah, I'll just keep it short. I just want to give a couple comments as, as an immigrant, as a formerly undocumented child, as a Latina, and as, woman of a tribe. I don't believe that just because something has been written somewhere and deemed appropriate English. I really think this is the time to really get rid of any type of colonialism and patriotism language and really set the record straight. And it isn't about appeasing everyone. It's just especially language that is extremely offensive, where women's bodies are constantly being used to really represent some sort of English idiomatic type of phrase. So I strongly, support this resolution.
Okay, thank you, Rosie. And with that, we're going to call the question. Oh, sorry, I just saw Larry Stone raise his hand. We'll give you 1 minute.
Where the hell is it? Thank you. Well, let me be clear and direct. I deeply regret those comments. It was inappropriate and offensive, and I apologize to all who was offended. I knew it was wrong immediately when I said it, and I immediately told the reporter who noted that in the article that I said that. Unlike a lot of politicians, there was no denial, no time lapse. Instead, I'm here tonight to take full responsibility for my remarks. As assessor, I'm very proud of the effort to diversify my office. When I first was elected in 1994, only 2 of 8 senior management members were female. All 8 were white. Today, 4 of the 8 senior managers are female, 3 people of color, and 1 LGBT. For 22 of the 25 years, 4 of the 5 assistant assessors, the number 2 people in my office, have been women, and 1 for 8 years was an LGBT. Today, 54% of the employees in the assessor's office are women, and 70% of the people are people of color.
Okay, I'm sorry to cut you off, Larry, but that brings us to time. David.
Yeah, okay, so, I think an appropriate response would be maybe some criticism in an op-ed to point this out. I do think it's language that's outdated, but I don't see that it is necessarily sexist. I would point out, I mean, are you familiar with the website sex.com that Gary Kremen started, for pornography? These things, I think it's worth criticizing. I think the approach, to addressing it here in the case of Larry is a little heavy-handed. And that's primarily what my position.
Thank you, David. So one last comment from Michelle, and then I'm going to call the question.
To the chair, Delilah also wants to say something. We're sharing the same screen, so I apologize.
Oh, well, I'll defer or I can wait and go after her.
Well, there's 2 hands raised, so go ahead and Delilah, Michelle, if you both want to speak, and we'll call the question afterwards.
Okay, Delilah, why don't you go first and I'll go second.
Okay, so I'm Delilah, but I think that because of the reason that he was elected during that time and things have changed, if he said it, he believed it, and I'm sorry, but yeah.
Thank you, Delilah. Michelle?
Well, that was very well said, Delilah. I think that while I think that it's good that Assessor Stone recognizes that he should, not have said those things. The fact is that he did say those things. And as I pointed out earlier, this is not his first rodeo. He has said inappropriate things in the past. I and many other women do find that language offensive. And I think that we need to go beyond just apologies for these things. And as Democrats, we have to hold our own Democrats accountable when they fall short of the mark. We can't only hold Republicans accountable when they say reprehensible or offensive or sexist or racist things. We have to hold our own accountable as well. And to whoever said that I had a poor grasp of the English language, I am a tenured full professor at Stanford University, and I'll thank you not to mansplain the use of language to me.
Okay, that's a minute. So we can go ahead and call the question. Jeff, if you could watch the poll, we'll leave it open for 1 minute for voting.
To the chair, we're all in the car, so that vote is for all of us, the family. So whomever is taking count.
So Ruben and Delilah are there as well?
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, we're in the car, so I apologize.
We're over a minute. Do you want me to stop the poll? Jenny, you're muted.
Sorry, I was talking the whole time.
All right, I can stop.
Please close the poll, and we will announce the results afterwards. We do review to ensure that those who voted are members in good standing, so we just want to double check before we give the results out. Next month, our meeting is on May 17th, and it'll be about the Newsom recall. We have some very excellent speakers, so we hope to see you there. Again, that's the third Monday at 7 p.m. And thank you again, everyone, for coming. The meeting is adjourned.